do that. It's 6 o'clock. My name is John Brown. I'm board president. I'd like to call the April 19th, 2022 Upriver meeting of the Eugene Water and Electric Board to order. The first agenda item is just a brief introduction of what we have. Number one, I want to thank you. I've been doing this almost 17 years, and this is the greatest, the largest group we've ever had on the Upriver. So thank you very much, because we're going to give you five-minute presentations about. Say again. Well, we were here last year, I think, in the big hall over here. But that aside, we're here to give you a little bit of information and then listen, because we know that there's a lot of things going on up here, a lot of big things, probably some of the biggest things that's happened in the last 20 years. And so we want to listen to you, and we want to find out what your perceptions are and what your requests are and things such as that. We have a lot of staff here, so we've got people from tree, we've got customer service, we've got billing, we've got fire recovery, we've got Leaburg, Walterville. So we have the people that can answer the questions, hopefully. So with that, I'd just like to say one small thing. I've got a list of the multi-million dollars that have come up to the valley from the fire restoration and things. And the one person that's here is Heather Bosch, your county commissioner, and she has been very, very instrumental in Another individual, we have Debbie Wilson, the general manager of Wayne Electric, so she's here. And board members, I've got Matt McRae, John Borofsky, Mindy Schlossberg, Sonia Carlson, and our general manager, Frank Lawson. With that, you've heard enough from me. What we're going to do, we're going to go through with the 5-minute presentations, and then Janine Tracy will have the microphone for those of you that have questions or comments, or if you want to, if she's going to take it around, just raise your hand, and we'll try and keep this going as long as we can, and try not to dominate too much time. So with that, I will start it off with the very first thing, and that's going to be the Watershed Recovery Status. Carl Morgenstern. There's Carl. Thank you.
Since there's so many people here, I thought I'd use a microphone. Hopefully, can everybody hear me? Yep. Excellent. Could you, oh, you got it. There it is. Well, good evening, everybody, and let's see if I can get this. So, my name is Carl Morgenstern. I'm EWEB's Watershed Restoration Program Manager. So ever since the Holiday Farm Fire, I've been the one kind of leading the effort amongst many, many partners and people that are helping with this effort. And so tonight, basically, I'm just going to give a quick update on the things we're doing and where we are, and then hand it off to Nancy, who's really going to dive into some of the landowner assistance programs we have post-fire. So I'll start by maybe I won't start. So as some of you or most of you may remember, before the fire, we had a program called Pure Our Partners. I was really working with about 90 landowners to help restore riparian areas and protect riparian forests. And after the fire, basically what we were able to do is kind of pivot with that partnership, which includes EWEB, the McKenzie Watershed Council, Upper Land, Soil and Water Conservation District, and the McKenzie River Trust. So it's a pretty tight-knit collaborative of working together. And we're able to basically pivot from doing riparian assessments to doing erosion and burn assessments. And so really the update on this is, we did a lot of work in those early days, which we're calling the emergency response phase of the recovery. And we learned a couple weeks ago that Congress did approve FEMA's reimbursement of our efforts through the county, and thanks Heather and Commissioner Buck for helping us. It's a long story to be able to get that money, but anyway, so we were able to get recovery of the $1.4 million that we spent on the emergency response efforts, which is really good news for us. And so when after the emergency response, basically we came up with this kind of plan on how we're going to work upriver and the restoration activities we're going to have and really try to engage in. And so it kind of went into 3 buckets. The risk-based, which is kind of the erosion and the fire fuels and riparian revegetation, all those efforts that we're doing right now, and those kind of immediate 3 years post-fire, maybe 4 years. And then kind of leaning into the resiliency where we're doing these larger landscape restoration projects that will help mitigate some of the impacts from the burn landscape. And then the strategic is kind of that outward looking long term. That's really just a concept right now. And so tonight I'm just going to talk about the first two activities that we have underway. And so this work really has a seasonality to it, which I wanted to try to reflect in this. And this isn't a perfect slide, but it's a start. The light gray is kind of where we're doing that activity, just it's not a priority potentially. But you can see that we just got finished revegetating and replanting. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And now we're moving into mulching of those new plants because we don't want to lose a lot of those new plants that we put in the ground to the dry summers, and doing hazard fuels and starting leaning into the invasive weed work and erosion control. And so basically what this looks like is we have this dashboard, and I can't really see it as well as I thought, but basically we have about 74 erosion projects underway, which is just starting, so we've only completed 2, the lot are in progress, you see up there. The fuels work, we have about 56 projects underway, which we've completed about 35 of them. And then the erosion control, where we have a little over, looks like 70 or so, I believe, erosion control, we're completed a number of those. Invasive, sorry. It's too hard to see. But anyway, the bottom line is there's a lot of work going on. We've done about 246 assessments out of the 259 that are on the books. And Nancy's going to talk a little bit more about kind of what we're doing in that realm and the landowner portal and how to sign up. So just to honor and really celebrate the work that just got done with our partners, the Watershed Council and the Upper Willamette Soil and Water Conservation District, really were the energy behind this effort, using some great contractors that we had. And so we did plant out almost 500,000 native shrubs and trees in the riparian areas, and basically replanted in inner areas where we had some mortality from last year's planting. And then we're using the Youth Corps and other contractors to come in behind that and mulch, and then over the summer irrigate where we may need to. And so that's kind of a quick overview of our risk-based work that's underway. And then the second big effort that we have underway are what we're calling the Resiliency Projects. And so this is a shot of the South Fork McKenzie project that the Forest Service and the Watershed Council completed a few years back. As you can see, the incised South Fork River, and now after this project, it's spread out across this floodplain, it's reconnected. And so what this does for us is it slows down flow, drops out sediment, it retains a lot of that water on the landscape. So in future fires, this acts as a great fire break. And so we're looking at doing those projects. A lot of them are focused right now in the middle McKenzie area. And so we have a Quartz Creek and a Fenrock Phase 2. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the Fenrock project from Phase 1 that McKenzie River Trust has done with the Forest Service. And then also we're going to be leaning into some work in the South Fork Phase 3 area. So all that work is kind of being teed up for 2023. Some of that will happen, I believe, in 2022, but that remains to be seen as far as Phase 3. And so the last slide is just to give you an example of what this looks like. So on the left is the current Quartz Creek conditions at snow melt. And so you just see it's basically a fire hose. This is velocity that you see. So the warmer the color, the more red and yellow, the higher the velocity. And then after the restoration project, this is using our restoration design. You can see how that creek is now reconnected with its floodplain like it used to be. It spreads out flow, slows down velocities. And if you do have landslides or debris flows above here, it would hit this and then basically be able to be absorbed into this floodplain and hopefully attenuate or at least help reduce the impacts of those kinds of things in the years to come. So that's my quick update. And so I'm going to pass it off to Nancy to provide you the landowner.
Thank you. I think I'm going to stand over here and sit down during this. So I'm Nancy, I'm an environmental specialist with drinking water source protection, and I'm going the wrong way. There we go. I know, it's tricky. So I just wanted to give a brief kind of overview of our Pure Water Partners website where you go to sign up for a property assessment, and so that's www.purewaterpartners.org, and there's just a button where you can sign up for a free property assessment, and we'll come out to your property and evaluate it for things like replanting needs, invasive species control, opportunities for fuels reduction, and erosion control practices and things like that. We have worked with over 250 landowners on these assessments so far and have over 110 landowners who have signed watershed stewardship agreements with us. And I will point out that right now we do have a bit of a waiting list. We've had a lot of interest from landowners, which is great. And we're just working to kind of increase capacity and be able to get to everyone. So if you do sign up, it might be a few weeks to a couple of months before someone is able to come out and do an assessment. So just that as a warning, but please sign up and we're excited to work with you. And I also wanted to say that the McKenzie Valley Long-Term Recovery Group, as a lot of you probably know, did a really thorough needs assessment back in January. And so we have been getting a lot of landowners who got information from that needs assessment about the kind of services we provide and have indicated an interest, whether it's in invasive species control or fuels reduction or things like that. And then this summer, we'll also be working to re-engage landowners outside of the burn area that we were working with before the fire happened and get everyone back into the program who wants to continue. And I just wanted to switch to some of EWEB's incentives for landowners as you all are rebuilding. We do have some financial incentives. So if homeowners are able to move the home or other structure away from the riparian setback area or floodplain area, usually that's about 50 feet for residentially zoned areas, you will be eligible for this financial incentive and you receive $2,000 once you get the building permits in advance of construction. And that's basically an incentive to, move your home back, be protective of water quality, and also reduce the flood risk to your property. And in addition, we will also offer up to $5,000 in additional incentives for related out-of-pocket expenses associated with moving that home footprint. So if you have to rebuild your septic system in a different location or extend your well lines or something like that, then that would be an eligible expense. And then we recognize that in these situations, it's not always possible to move homes back from the river. So we do have alternative incentives for installing advanced treatment septic systems, which are also can be more protective of water quality than those traditional ones. So there are some different options here to look into. We also have our septic system zero interest loan program, and this is for homeowners who need to make major repairs or replacements. And we've recently expanded that from $10,000 to $20,000 per system because we do recognize that a lot of these more advanced treatment systems that are more protective of water quality are also obviously more expensive as well. And so homeowners affected by the fire will have a longer repayment term for these loans. And again, it's not just for EWEB customers, it's for any homeowner upstream of our drinking water intake. And coming soon, we hope, any day now, there is some grant funding from the state wildfire recovery bill for septic system repairs and replacements. And this will be targeted towards low and moderate income homeowners for these repairs and replacements. And the idea is that these grant funds would largely cover the cost of installing a new septic system. So we're hoping that will be available soon. And we also are looking into cost share options for those homeowners that don't meet the low or moderate income targets. So hopefully there will be lots of funding coming this way, but we just don't know the exact timing yet. And I wanted to also kind of advertise our naturescaping workshop. We haven't had one in person in a couple of years. We've had some online workshops, but this will be in person. This will be right here on Monday, May 2nd at 5 o'clock. And so we're focusing not just on kind of native plants and riparian landscapes, but also on fire resilient methods. And we will have someone from the Oregon Department of Forestry who's going to come and talk about defensible space and fire-wise practices. And again, this is hosted by the Pure Water Partners program with some RSVP information here. And if you stop by our table in the back at the end, there are some fire resilient naturescaping type guides that we have available that we worked with the University of Oregon, their landscape architecture program, to put those together, and those will come with your RSVPs for the workshop. So we hope to see many of you there. And I will just end with some of our resources and links. And then I will pass it on to Janine and Tyler to talk about wildfire mitigation efforts and planning.
we're going to switch from recovery to fire mitigation. I'm Tracy. I'm the Resiliency Program Manager here at EWEB. Let's see, so we know the weather's shifting. We know that we're seeing more frequent and larger wildfires, and our work practices here at EWEB are shifting as well. We're building our first wildfire mitigation plan. It's in construction, and it'll really focus on safety and resiliency as the core aspect of it, but also bring in some new efforts, especially targeted at areas of higher fire risk. Oregon utilities all have to submit their plans by the summer, so ours, and one of the first things you have to do in your mitigation plan is to develop a map of where your higher fire risk zones are, because then you want to target your work to those risk zones. And I'm sure it'll be no surprise to anybody here, but our first preliminary look at this is identify the upper McKenzie River and the valley here as our primary high fire risk zone, plus a small section of South Eugene and the hills as another area. So this is where we'll be doing some of our targeted activities. So once you have your baseline risk assessment, the next thing is you build your mitigation actions to address risk in those areas. So if you start at the bottom of this, you'll be looking at a really strong maintenance plan. And what we're doing upriver is we're doing annual patrols for both vegetation, so doing those annual tree trimming, as well as annual inspections of all of our lines. So that's kind of a new thing, is these extra patrols. And in 2021, when we did our first set of extra patrols, we found about 100 cross arms that we accelerated replacement of. This year, we just went through the whole system again, and we had about 2/3 less priority repairs to be taken care of. So we know that this is making a good difference in the system upriver. Another new practice that I wanted to mention is we did use helicopter trimming up on the Carmen transmission line. That's a really remote and difficult area for us to keep trimmed with all the vegetation. And that was a super efficient way to get through that system very quickly. And what we're seeing is not only does it protect against fire risk, but also shows better improvement for winter storms as well. Moving up to targeted grid investments, grid hardening practices, I just wanted to bring up a couple of examples for you. When we were rebuilding after the fire, we did take an opportunity to change the way we configure the overhead lines on North Gate Creek Road. And really what we're trying to do is keep that vegetation from touching those lines and creating ignition risk when there's storm damage. So that was one example. And another is that I think we have some 62 new transformers upriver after the rebuild, and all of those have the less flammable fluid inside. That's another example. And Nancy gave a great overview of all the permits that are available for rebuilding. One more that I wanted to bring to your attention is we do have an incentive to help you underground your secondary service. I understand that supply chain issues is making some of that challenging for folks, but if you're interested, we encourage you to check that out, and we'll be happy to help you out with that. So just looking ahead, and then I'll pass it to Tyler. We are going to be reviewing all of our construction standards for the upriver area and our high-risk fire zones, and I'll give you a couple of examples. So we know we have some osprey activity upriver. We've got some 22 or 30 nesting platforms. But if those nests get too big, they get unwieldy, they can create an ignition source. So that's an example of we would do raptor framing and other kinds of mitigation efforts to keep that kind of risk from happening. So you might see that work upriver as well.
If I can knock the table over to. My name is Tyler Nice. I'm the Electric Division Manager at EWEB. Thank you very much for your time and attention tonight. Really, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the real-time operations that happen during fire season, and also red flag warnings when they come. So here's some examples of some of the things we do. So what we do during fire season is we change our field practices when we're doing work upriver or anywhere where there's restrictions. There's a lot of restrictions around wait times and carrying water and tooling, and so we train up, and that's one thing we're doing in the spring is training up both with our internal safety folks, but also with the Forest Service to really tune up and make sure we have the most current practices. That's part of the deploying fire suppression equipment as well. We have some pull behind trailers with water tanks and also some pickups outfitted with water tanks that we use. So if we're doing work and we do see something, we can help. Also weather monitoring technology. That's an exciting project, partnership with U of O on Smith Ridge. We have this camera here, and it allows us to log in and see that part of the valley. That really gives them eyes way quicker than we could drive up there and look. So that's something that Other states that are farther along in this have lots of weather stations, and this is kind of the first pilot for us, so really excited to partner with them. You can see the staggering stats, much better than your iPhone, 40 times zoom on there and stuff like that, so hoping to get some good use out of that. Beyond fire season, then we have the red flag event, so when a high fire risk situation or fire weather is coming through, and a red flag event, if you don't know, is a set of criteria with temperature, humidity, and fuel loading and moisture content, and the weather service will declare a red flag. And when we get that trigger, that goes straight to our dispatch from the weather service, kind of do a credentialed sign up for that. So our dispatchers, their 24/7 operations, they get that. That triggers some processes, which is calling crews out. They'll do some patrols. They'll also do what we're calling protective settings mode. In a normal day, your lines running to your houses and up and down the road, the feeders, they will, if they get a contact, they'll retry to try to keep your power on. In these modes, that's turned off and it's one and done. They'll also make them more sensitive and trip off quicker. And what we do is also we will contact 911 dispatch, make sure there's nothing active in the area, and we'll send our troubleshooters up, which are all on call 24/7. Also the outreach to public and safety partners. So you'll see on Facebook, and we coordinate with other agencies, and we'll start launching internal procedures to stay in touch on the situation. And really de-energization is a last resort, but it is a tool we have, either from a report safety out in the field or one of our staff, or if an agency instructs us, we will do that too, or active fire like it says there. So it's kind of a summary of what we do in real time when these events happen. Really appreciate it, and I'll pass it on to the generation group. Lisa Krentz next.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Krentz. I'm EWEB's generation manager, so that includes the Leaburg, Walterville, and Carmen Smith hydroelectric projects here in the McKenzie. Joining me tonight is Mark Zineker. He's our generation engineering supervisor, and he will be sharing status of where we're at with options for the Leaburg Canal, which I know is of great interest to many of you in this room. Before I hand it over to Mark, I did want to take an opportunity to introduce Jeremy Samoji. He's back here at this table. Jeremy joined EWEB last fall as our project manager for the Leaburg evaluation, and he'll be here this evening tonight to share some more information at the table. I invite you to come up afterward. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mark to share where we're at with things.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Good evening. A few slides to run through with you, and then we'll have questions at the end. The three main topics that I'd like to address are the decision-making process that we currently have underway for the Leaburg Canal and the timeline associated with that. I'd like to provide an overview of a short list of alternatives that we are analyzing in depth, and then talk about what will happen after a decision is made and what kind of timelines we might see for the selected alternative. So this is the decision-making process that we have currently underway. About a year ago is when we started collecting background information and developing a communication plan so that we could get information out to our board and to the public about the factors that play into what the viable, realistic alternatives are for the canal going forward. We're currently at this red line in Q2 of 2022, where we're wanting to reach out and inform the board and the public about the shortlisted alternatives, so that we have an opportunity to field questions and receive comments about those alternatives, and then so that we can feed that into the next steps of work, which include putting our planning level cost estimates through net present value financial analysis, as well as gathering environmental and social feedback to reflect in our triple bottom line, so that by the end of this year, the board is in a position that we can present them with conclusions that would allow them to make a decision about the Leaburg Canal. The table in the back and the website that we've set up for the Leaburg Canal contains a lot of detailed information about the process and the milestones. I did just want to highlight a few of them here. Late Q2, so maybe early June timeframe, we are expecting to have a survey sent out to the community regarding the 4 alternatives that we have under analysis. We're looking for feedback and questions on those. At the August board meeting, we will be presenting preliminary results from our analysis to the board. There'll be write-ups on that that'll be available for public review as well. And we will be encouraging comments and feedback so that our next phase of work, which is to compile all that into a draft summary report, can be completed by October. That draft summary report will go to the board. And again, we'll put out a call for questions and comments on the draft. And then that will be finalized and presented to the board in December, along with our conclusions with expectation that the board would then be able to make a path forward decision by the end of the year. So the 4 alternatives on our short list, we'll give you a little bit of background information on those now. So we have 2 return to service options under consideration. The first is full facility restoration. That would involve rehabilitating the full 4.5 miles of the canal to current safety standards. It would also, and in order to accomplish that, we would expect that we will need to line the entirety of the canal, as well as reconstruct portions of the canal to address seepage and seismic stability issues at some specific locations. The second return to service alternative under consideration is a partial restoration. That would involve construction of a new power plant and rehabilitation of only a short portion of the canal, say a 1.25 miles. And the remainder of the canal would be converted over to stormwater conveyance. In both cases, the return to service options, we would be maintaining the existing dam, the existing lake, and the canal intake facilities. And then we're also looking at 2 decommissioning alternatives. The decommissioning alternatives include full decommissioning. This would entail removal of all of the project features, all the project structures. So our dam, this passage facility, the canal itself, the power plant would be removed. And then the creeks that are currently intercepted by the canal would be rerouted to the river. Now that is in keeping with what some other FERC project owners have had to do with their projects. The thing is, Leaburg is quite a bit different than most FERC projects that might consist of a dam with a power plant at the base. In our situation, we've got facilities spread out over 5 miles. We have a lot of residential development and a major highway located between the canal and the river, so which creates some complicating factors. And so we are thinking that a decommissioning to a stormwater conveyance could be a viable opportunity or option for us. So in the decommission to stormwater conveyance, we would only be returning to pre-construction conditions where it's practical. That might be at the dam and the lake, select creeks, but the remainder of the canal would be converted over to stormwater conveyance. And then in both of the decommissioning alternatives, we would be replacing the dam with a new bridge in approximately the same location. And then this final slide shows the roadmap of the future. So if the board makes a decision at the end of 2022, there's those 2 basic paths that we could go down. So what's in the future? Well, a lot of construction is in the future. Whether we are returning the power canal to its existing configuration or decommissioning, either approach is a tremendous amount of construction activity. In either case, we will be constructing some near-term risk reduction measures. Those would focus on isolating portions of the canal that receive the high flow inputs from Cogswell and Johnson Creek. So we know that that's in the near term of construction in either case. But the specifics of the work that follows after that will depend on whether it's a return to service or a decommissioning path that we're on. Lots of regulatory processes, lots of relicensing processes if we return to service. And in neither case would we expect to reach the finish line until the end of this decade. So, 2030 time range before a new normal is established. So that is a quick overview of the work that's underway. I'm really glad to see so many people here. We've got a lot of information available, and we'll continue to be putting that out to the public. And so we'd encourage you to continue paying attention, asking questions, and being part of our process. So thank you.
With that, we'll hand it over to Julie.
Your slide. Okay, I'm here, we have no slides, so nothing to see. Hi, everyone. I'm Julie McKenzie. I'm the Chief Customer Officer, and joining me is Mark Duval. He's our Customer Service Team Lead. And we are here to talk to you about the estimated bills that many customers received just over the past year or so. All customers in the Upriver service territory should have received a letter and a frequently asked questions document that really describes more about the estimations. That should have come in the mail over the last 2 weeks. If this is not sounding familiar and you think you didn't receive a letter, you can go visit Kim and Samantha over at Customer Service, and they have some extra copies for you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and he's going to give us some more information on the details around estimations.
Hi, Mark Duval. I'm a Customer Service Team Lead, as Julie mentioned. And I just wanted to mention a few things about the estimated bills. I know they've generated a lot of questions and discussion. Estimated bills have affected many EWEB customers over the past 6 to 8 months. They have been particularly difficult for our Upriver customers where we don't have smart meters available. Staffing shortages and meter reading combined with other operational issues resulted in a higher number of estimations than we have seen in recent years. Some customers were estimated intermittently over the last 6 to 8 months. Others have had multiple estimations consecutively, or sometimes 2 to 3 months in a row. So that creates a real hardship for some people. Some of our customers upriver were still being estimated into February, with true-ups occurring into March. So it was a pretty recent thing for some people here. There's no perfect way to estimate, to perform mass estimations. Estimates are based on past usage, and are almost always higher or lower than the actual consumption for any specific month. The fire also had a negative impact on our estimation accuracy because some customers had little or no comparative consumption from the previous year. Following an estimated period, there's a true-up or an actual read, which self-corrects for any under or overbilled consumption that from the estimated period. The true-up can appear higher or lower than normal depending on how accurate the estimation was. Customers who experience multiple consecutive estimates are more at risk for a larger true-up balance. The key point is that the total bill amounts for the larger period from one actual read to the next actual read are correct and accurate. Our metering department now is fully staffed and is working to address anything within our control to avoid estimated reads going forward. EWEB does understand the impact that unexpected large bills have on customers, whether they be from estimates, true-ups, or other high, winter bill activity. We do acknowledge the hardships these situations can create, and we strive to consistently work through the issues with our customers. There are a few programs and strategies that can help, including payment plans and budget billing. Budget billing is an average bill plan which spreads bills out equally over a 12-month period. After 12 months, budget bills are reviewed for correctness and can be adjusted for the next 12 months if they are too high or too low for the previous year. We encourage anyone with questions on their account to give customer service a call. Generally, hold times are short Tuesday through Fridays, but Mondays are our busier days. We would be happy to spend time analyzing your bill with you. And also, we are gathering information over here, contact information from you for anyone who wants a call back within the next few days. We can take some advanced reports and analyze your consumption and try to paint a picture that makes sense to you. That's all I got. Thanks.
Janine's gonna take that, and the next thing I'd like to thank you for all the presenters now.
Sorry, trying to listen.
And we would very much like your input, criticism, compliments, anything you want to do. So we've got almost everybody here that can help answer the questions. I've got a really good level of staff knowledge here and everything. And so if you have a question, raise your hand. Janine will bring you the mic, and then we'll get you to the people that can answer it. Or if you have a comment or whatever you want to do. I know you do, because my phone's rang a lot in the last 6 months. So feel free to ask any question you want, anything. Yes, sir.
Yeah, John,
You get the mic, would you please, Steve?
both the hatcheries, McKenzie and Leaburg Hatchery, will be affected by any decision that's made. Could someone address how the assessment will treat the two hatcheries?
Right here.
Mike will.
Right. So, yeah, we've been in very close communication with McKenzie Hatchery.
With the McKenzie Hatchery in particular, they were immediately impacted by the need to take the canal offline and out of service. So they have been exploring water supply alternatives with the support of the Corps of Engineers that owns the facility. So they have got their own process underway in terms of trying to understand what their alternatives are for water supply going forward. And the same is true with the Leaburg hatchery. They are, as you point out, impacted by any decision that lowers the water surface elevation of the lake. So both those facilities would be impacted, would have to have an alternative source of water supply, and we will reflect that impact along with all of our other social environment. There's an environmental impact, not just a social impact with those types of ripple effects. So that will be documented and communicated to the board as a factor.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
So I think I understand this whole canal thing is based upon leakage, correct? Is that right?
So
Is that 100% the reason for this whole exercise?
So the canal was taken out of service in October 2018 due to indications of internal erosion. That is excessive seepage. Seepage is normal, but it can progress to the point where it's doing damage to the embankment, and we were seeing evidence of that. And then in the process of exploring repair alternatives to fix that problem, we made an unpleasant discovery that that portion of the canal was also contained very low strength soils that presented a seismic vulnerability. And so it was a combination of factors, but I guess the tip of the iceberg was the excessive seepage. And then the realization that it went beyond that to other hazard considerations that would need to be remedied before we could bring it back online.
Could you used the word portion. Could you describe that in distance, length of the dikes or of the levee or whatever you call it?
The specific area where the initial problem was identified was about 1,000 feet in length that would need to be remediated. However, the canal is old enough that we don't have great records about the construction history. So our regulator would expect us to explore other portions of the canal with similar characteristics to see if we have any vulnerabilities there as well. So we know for sure that we have this 1,000-foot reach, but we're suspicious that that is not the only area that would need to be remediated.
So we've noticed that some structures, some houses along the canal that back up to the canal are being removed, and the scuttlebutt is that EWEB is buying up properties along the canal. Is this true?
You want to take that
Yeah, so EWEB did purchase a home along the canal a few years ago, and then just recently we were entered into purchase agreements for 2 others. The only home that was removed was the one that was purchased a couple of years ago. We know that we're going to need to do some work on the canal, but as you can tell from what Mark just shared, we're still in the process of investigating exactly what we need to do and where. And so we don't have plans at this time to proactively purchase any additional properties. What we have been doing is just monitoring to see if properties were coincidentally listed for sale. That's what happened with the 2 recent properties, but we do not have intent or plans to go in and purchase proactively any additional properties.
Well, wait in the back there, please. Yes. Yes.
Let me give
You may need the mic,
microphone.
because you're kind of far away.
I'm one of your customers, and so I'd appreciate it. I'm seeing a little bit of a difference. I'm seeing properties that are being marketed by a broker from Beaverton, and I think it's really odd that there's brokers representing EWEB from Portland, and there's brokers representing homeowners along the canal, and none of them are brokers from this area. Could you explain a little bit about why that's the case?
I can't explain why sellers chose a particular broker, and that whether that was coincidental or not. I don't have any information on that. What I can say is that broker, although based in Portland, does have some history in Lane County. So it's not completely off the charts for that person to have marketed some homes here. But otherwise, I don't have information on how sellers have chosen their
So there's no
brokers.
coincidence that there's several properties that have been targeted by this broker from Beaverton?
I honestly can't say what prompted those folks to sell their homes. We had no indication of it, nor did we express any interest in those particular properties prior to them being listed.
Okay, but you have started to purchase those properties as they become available, correct?
No, we purchased those 2 properties, but we are not wholesale purchasing properties along the canal at this time. What we are doing is just looking at properties that had those 2 properties that coincidentally came available. And they seem to be in places where we thought we might have an opportunity to do some construction there. And so we took that opportunity, but it's not a plan we have going forward.
So there are no other homeowners or business owners that should be concerned about their properties being purchased along the canal, or should they, whether they do?
What I would say is that we're waiting for the board to make a decision at the end of this year, and then we'll have a better idea of what we're going to actually do on the canal, and then we'll be able to assess what, if any, needs we have.
Okay, and so the market prices that you're going to be paying are going to be based on a Portland broker and a Beaverton broker to determine what those prices are, or are you going to work with local brokers?
We have a local broker, and again, we can't control what brokers a seller may choose to do business with. What I will say is that as a public entity, we have a responsibility to pay fair market value for our customers. And so that is certainly our goal going forward with any, if we were to make any additional acquisitions in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
Is there an EWEB person who is at the intersection of the water in EWEB and property owners who have water rights?
So the question is about the water rights off the canal?
The question ultimately is about water rights off of the canal. Yes.
Yeah, we do have people that, there we go.
Yes, I'll let Mark take this one.
So there are, I think, approximately 20 folks with, we all say water rights, but there's some details here, water rights certifications, and anyway, it gets a bit complex. There, of the 20, say, property owners who are withdrawing water from the canal, there's only a small handful of them that had agreements with EWEB that were not subject to interruption. So we've been working closely with a subset of the water right holders to come up with alternative solutions. We've also been working with some of the folks that have water right certificates without an obligation from EWEB to try to help smooth their path forward and help them explore alternatives. But the water right considerations also are being identified, documented for the board's consideration as we're presenting them with our triple bottom line analysis of the effects of the alternatives.
Thank you. Other questions? In the back, right, ma'am? Go ahead.
My question also pertains to the water rights. I happen to be one of those people. And since the canal has been drained, I have no way.
Get her a microphone,
Could you
please.
just get a microphone, please, so they can hear you? Thank you. Sorry.
All the way on the other side of the. I'm concerned about the irrigation of my property because I feel like my property is much more subject to burn now because I don't have any water to water it. And I have very tall trees around my house and I am literally going around with a bucket hand watering all my plants on my property. So I'd like to know what are our water rights because it doesn't seem like we really have much.
Yeah, I would say the majority of the property owners who were drawing water from the canal historically are in that position where we had, EWEB was able to accommodate while we were in operation and unfortunately are unable to accommodate with the canal in its current situation. The information that we are developing about alternatives for our water right holders, we'll share that information so that you understand what your options are. There are options, but yeah, I definitely understand those impacts are real. Yeah, there's options through the Oregon Water Resources Board for transfers of your point of diversion. And there's a variety of flavors of how that can be done.
Could I suggest that at the end of the meeting, you maybe hook up with Mark or one of these others when we're doing the questions and get specifics and they can get your contact info and hopefully get you the answers you need in the specificity. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so to circle back around the properties, one of the larger properties that I think you're in agreement with to buy right now is adjacent to mine. And one of the questions I had was, do we have any plans of like upkeep and vegetation management for those areas? It's a pretty large area with a lot of vegetation.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I would say that we will be developing property management plans for the parcels that we're purchasing. It is not our intent to let either the structures or the land itself to go into disrepair. So this was new. Again, we didn't have plans to purchase these properties, so we're just working up those property management plans now.
Yes.
For those of us that are downriver of the dam, what are the implications for flow of the river? And could it recreate new floodplains? Have you thought through those issues?
Yeah, no, great question. And a lot of the dams on the McKenzie do provide a flood control role. Those are the Army Corps' Cougar and Blue River reservoirs. In our case, the Leaburg project is a run-of-river facility, meaning that whatever water flows into Leaburg Lake is immediately released downstream, either to the river itself or to the canal. And we really don't have a storage capacity at that facility that would have a measurable effect on the downstream watershed consolidation. So it's really has always been a pass-through, which means you would see no change with or without the dam. Basically.
So when the water rises under the bridge and the debris comes with it, it'll be the same, right?
So if we decommission, the dam would go away. And yes, that debris that we currently pass through the roll gates in chunks as opposed to one at a time would continue to just flow down the river that area unobstructed.
Yes, sir.
What happens to the land if you take the dam out
to the landowners upstream along there that is now the edge of their property and that's gonna move the river to, say, Highway 126.
Yeah, that is indeed what would happen. The river hugs the highway, and so when the lake is drawn down, it tends to stay on that side of the channel. So far as so yes, they would have what was lake turning into more of a.
I know that part.
Area, but their ownership.
I want to know if, do you have any plans to do anything with that property? Is it your property? Whose property is it?
So the portion along the park is EWEB ownership. The portion upstream, which is the majority of the lake shore, is privately owned.
Right. And so your property line, our property line, ends at the lake. And if you were to look across and see Ike's Pizza, there's quite a distance between there. Who owns that property?
That would be you, once the.
So our tax lot changes.
You know, I'm not sure what the process would be by that, but, and correct me if I'm wrong, if there's somebody in the room that understands this differently, but the property line would go to the ordinary high water line. As the ordinary high water line changes, the property designation changes as well.
So somebody could get back to me on that?
Yeah, if you would, you don't mind just giving your name and contact info, but I think, you've got a little knowledge on that too. So usually, because it's not navigable above the dam, you usually own to the center of your legal description. I'd check it out and see. You may just own to the middle of that riverbed, and that riparian area between what's currently the lake and what's the center of the river may be your new property line. But I'd just check your legal description and title company, but give your name and contact info to these people and let them do it. Or whatever, that, that's what we're here for. We're here to answer the questions and hopefully get you some answers. So, yes, sir, go ahead. You got another question.
Back to the canal thing, just trying to get this clearly in my mind. I've seen you operate the canals at many different levels over time. I'd also kind of like to know how long each of you people who are presenting tonight have been with EWEB. Just if you wouldn't mind just telling us when you came on to EWEB, it might help us. Here's the questions. So I think I have identified two options. Canal full, restored and full, canal gone. Dam gone, canal gone. Do I have that correct?
No, we've got two return to service options. In one case, all of the canal remains. In another case,
in full.
If we were to operate the canal in the future, we would operate it like we have in the past.
Okay.
So it's sometimes full. It's only full.
At that level.
It's only, yeah, we would maintain the same operating level. It's only full when there's enough water in the river for us to divert our full water rate, which is not very much of the year. That's why you see it have a variable water surface elevation. Probably the average is about half capacity.
Okay. And the other option is gone.
The other option is, one of them is restored to pre-project conditions, so yes, essentially gone. Okay. And then the other is conversion to a stormwater conveyance, which would be modified, likely lowering the crest of the canal. But it would still convey stormwater. So the creeks that get intercepted would continue to flow through the canal back to the river in some locations.
I don't hear an option being mentioned, maybe I'm just missing it, excuse me if I am, about canal stays, water flows through there at a level lower than the upper normal limits. Right,
so you're wondering if we could solve our problem by just operating the canal at a lower flow rate?
And not affecting so many people's so much.
Yeah, that was one of the approaches that we brought to our regulator as a possibility, because it is lower risk to operate the canal at a lower level. However, it makes, from our regulator's perspective, no difference with respect to the type of improvements that would be required. So we would have to reconstruct the canal the same way to operate it at half capacity as at full capacity.
That's the feds.
And that's in large part due to the potential for the creeks to carry additional water, right?
Yeah, that's part of the story is that the normal flow rate of our canal is 2,500 CFS. And those creeks that we intercept, they can put that much water into the canal under a very large storm scenario. It's never happened before, but it's theoretically possible that you could have a big enough storm move through that you would fill up the canal to normal operating just from rainwater.
Yes, sir, right here.
So the 2,500 CFS normal operation would be what you're shooting for if you were to bring the canal back to full production. So if you went with a Lupton speed spillway, would that be less than 2,500? Because it looks like you'd be generating less power.
We would be generating less power, but we would still want to use our full water right if we went to the trouble of building a plant and have it. It's possible that we would modify the, do a cost benefit analysis, and what's the right capacity for the cost. But for planning purposes right now, before we get into that really detailed analysis, we would assume it'd be the same 2,500 CFS.
Lady right back there.
I have a question about the Walterville Pond and the, over the last few years, it's kind of been decommissioned.
So I was just kind of curious if that would be, if that is included in your reconstruction project.
Yeah, so
That would be reused?
our current effort is focused on the Leaburg Canal. Walterville Pond was decommissioned about 10 years ago, I think now. And that was because our regulator recategorized it from low hazard to high hazard. And so they were asking us to reconstruct the pond to modern safety at a time when we were no longer using it as a pump storage facility. That's why it was originally built, was for pump storage. And we were just using it for recreational purposes at that point in time. And so we had really no rationale for making what would have been a very significant investment to keep the canal, keep the pond full.
I just, because it was just part of the connection on the canal, that's what made me wonder if that was something that would be reused.
Other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
First of all, I wanted to thank, no one's really thanked the Pure Water Partner Groups over here. You guys have done an incredible job all the way through. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. One of the groups that brought up underground power lines, I just want to let you know, we've asked 3 times, once on the phone, twice through your websites. We've got about 8 power poles on our property. Love to have them underground. Haven't heard anything back for over a year. Last time I asked was probably, I don't know, about 3 weeks ago or so. But then the third thing, and I don't need, if you guys want to get back to it, I'll send it back, send another request form again, no problem.
If you want me to get info and do something with it, I can do that as well.
No, that's all right. I'll send you another request. Just look for one. Who is the commissioner for the Upriver area? You guys are spending tens of millions of dollars. Do we have one?
Actually, we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars. If you take Carmen, and this thing is gonna, really, it's gonna be a huge project. We have to build it to a 1 in a million year standard. It's amazing what the feds are requiring us to do. We don't have a commissioner up here. Each one of us represents 2 city council wards in the city, and Mindy is the at-large, supposed to be that. When I was in that position, I kind of de facto took it, but she kind of is the one. It's unfortunate you don't get to vote for any of us.
Sure.
You don't, but we're trying to be as responsible and to you as we are to any of the people that do have a vote for us.
So if we have comments or concerns after the meeting, is there one of the commissioners we should be focusing on?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, try to do that.
Thank you for your acknowledgement of Pure Water Partners. They're a good group of people. Yes, sir. Right over here. Thank you.
My name is Richard Tracy. My wife and I bought a little over 3 acres about 20 years ago. we're 3 or 4 blocks up here. And one of the reasons we bought that land was because with the understanding we have water rights coming off the Johnson Creek drainage. You and I have talked a couple of times over the last 15 years. A couple of times, some EWEB employees, none of them are here, but they came challenging me about my water, whether I had water rights or not. I think we established that I haven't. So when we bought that property, it was with the idea, I got water rights, I can have my raspberry bushes, I can have my blueberries, I can have my orchard, I have my garden, I can raise my koi and sell them. And 4 years ago, I have no water no more. I understand that's not your fault or anybody's fault on the board. 4 years now has gone by and I don't have those things anymore. Somebody took it from me and I haven't got it back. In another 4 or 5 years, we probably won't be alive. That's very disappointing.
I wish we had a solution for you right now, because we're working as hard as we can on this, and we're spending as much money as we can on it, but we're at the mercy of the federal government. And to say,
I got one.
you're telling us, we wish, I mean, we just relicensed Leaburg and Walterville and spent $150 million, and we're not generating power. And so we understand not what you're going through, but you've got to look at it from our perspective. We don't, I'm not going to debate it. I'm just going to respond and kind of give you a fact that we too are being.
You guys are talking about money, we're talking about paradise.
Right. And if we could put water in the canal tomorrow, we would, but we can't. It'd be a federal violation.
Commissioner Brown, can I just add something to that? So I did want to make it clear that what happens with Leaburg, I know has a lot of impact on many people in this room, either from a social perspective and quality of life perspective, as Mr. Tracy mentioned, or also you might be concerned around the environmental impacts. That's part of the reason we're doing such a comprehensive triple bottom line analysis for all 4 of these options that we have. And we very much want to hear from you around what the impacts to you personally are. So again, another plug to please take the survey that's going to be coming out, and also get in touch with us so that we want to make sure that we fully understand the impacts to you and that we can include that in our analysis.
One thing I wanted to ask about is prioritizing foot traffic and foot traffic along the run of the canal bank. There's actually at the spillway now a blockage, so you can't walk from Leaburg up to the dam. And it's not nearly as important as water rights, I know, but from a community resource perspective, the canal bank is a considerable resource. People use it all the time. People walk their dogs, they ride their bikes. So as you look at the social impact, and if you're doing a social impact survey, it would be helpful to evaluate and prioritize making that a continued use. And if you're doing new construction at Luckman Spillway, it would be very nice if that construction was done in a way that allowed through foot traffic up to the dam.
Thank you. That's good feedback. That's what we like to hear, because now you don't have to go on a survey, or if you do, but thank you very much. We get it. When it's important to you, well, it's something that we would consider. So thank you very much. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Just so that I understand, the Leaburg Dam generates power, correct? No?
No.
Does not generate.
No, it just diverts water into Leaburg Canal, and the power is generated down here at the powerhouse.
Below.
Got it. Okay.
You basically answered it.
Yes, sir.
So I kind of got boondoggled today by an email, a text, that all this is happening. And my attitude is pretty sad. Bottom line is 18 years ago, I came up here and I looked at a piece of property, and it's by Ike's. And I didn't even look at the house. I looked at the view of Leaburg Lake. And I looked at all the people that were canoeing and kayaking, longboarding and enjoying it. Now we have a place for handicapped people to enjoy the lake, and having that emptied. I mean, I saw it when you guys had to work on that. It's a joke. There's nothing flowing. I mean, it's going to be horrible for people just to, when they come around the corner my heart rate just goes down. I love looking at that water, and I overlook the water, and I don't want that to change.
Well, I'll speak a little bit to that just from the compassion. I have a very strong passion for the McKenzie Valley as well, but we don't want it to change either. We didn't want any of this to change. This isn't.
I just don't understand why you're thinking about taking the dam out.
Well, it's the dam diverts water, and if there's no need to divert the water, that's a question that we'll have to answer about the cost, because that's an old dam, and whether or not we just take the dam out and replace it with a bridge, or if we keep the dam. And because those things, the old saying, they eat while you sleep, they cost quite a bit of money a year to just maintain, and that'd be a pretty expensive bridge to create that lake. But those are some of the things we'll consider, because this whole thing is going to be a very, very expensive proposition no matter what we do.
It'll be expensive for the people too. I mean,
Absolutely.
Literally, you know, we pay everyone's wages, and we're also looking at our home values, our property values going down tremendously. And a lot of people aren't going to be able to use that lake.
Well, all of that will be considered when we get it in here, but we're hiring other people to give us the options, because some of the preliminary cost estimates are very, very high. And we have to be also responsible to the ratepayers, because we're spending $150 million on Carmen right now. And this could be, you know, anywhere from $60 to $100 million as well.
Right, but how many millions of dollars are all of us gonna lose on our properties because of what you're gonna do?
Well, if we could, we kind of keep a queue here. If you have a specific question, could you use the mic and then ask one people? I have a lady in the queue back here, and then I'll get to you, okay? Thank you. Yes.
My name is Nadine Scott, and I have a couple hats here I want to talk about tonight. One, I'm a property owner on Leaburg Lake, and I'm also a realtor. And so I see you decommission that lake. For one, property values, as this gentleman said, are going to go down. And aesthetics, we're trying to rebuild a community here, and the aesthetics is going to be awful. The other hat I want to say is that I'm also president of the McKenzie Chamber of Commerce. And our economy up here is based on tourism. And there's thousands of people a summer, a year, that use Leaburg Lake recreationally. And those people are going to lose all this. And those people also pay your EWEB bill every month. And as far as I know, that is the only access for wheelchair disability people to access the lake to fish or boat. And I think you need to think about that when you make your decisions.
Okay, thank you. Now, other questions or comments? Ma'am, did you want to get back in the queue and make another comment?
I like keep hearing about is cost analysis, cost analysis. Well, cost analysis, all this. Could you take that into consideration?
Sure will. That's what we do. We look at everything, and we try to do the best we can.
Everyone here.
Well, there's a whole lot more than people here that'll lose, and so we understand that, but we also have a fiduciary duty to, you know, we're a power and a water company, and so we have to keep that in mind too. So thank you. Other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
I hear a lot of comments about analysis and surveys and questionnaires and stuff like that, but you mentioned hundreds of millions, or $60 million or something. Did I hear that right? On this project, hundreds of millions.
We don't have
60
cost
million.
estimates yet,
Okay.
but we've seen some preliminary
But
numbers that could be over that.
Okay, so I've heard you mention hundreds of millions for Carmen Smith, 60 million for this canal, what percentage of that would you say that the ratepayers pay for? 100%?
Yeah.
Okay, so wouldn't it seem like we would deserve a vote instead of a comment? Shouldn't we be able to vote on what happens literally instead of just throwing a comment out in the air, emailing it to somebody, maybe getting a response, not knowing if anybody really cared? Why would that not qualify us for a stature? Why are we not stakeholders in this since we're paying for it?
To the level of a vote, I'm
There's just a little number on the numbers. There's 2,300 customers that we have up the river. We have over 88,000 customers that we serve. So everybody would be paying for it, so everybody would be voting for it. This area compromises 50% of our service area, with only 2,300 people. You saw the map about the fire risk?
Yes.
The entire valley is, when we brought the electric service here, it was so we could pump water. It was, and so the electric service was kind of a side of that. And that's something that we've all heard, and if other commissioners want to chime in, go ahead. John Brodsky.
So some of you may not be familiar, but when they mentioned the term triple bottom line, okay? So that means there's three parts to it. One of them is economic, right? What is the costs? How much is it going to cost us? What is the cost to actual dollars and cents, right? The second is the social cost, which is what you guys are talking about. We drain the lake. It affects the economy up here. And then the third one is the environmental one. What is it doing to the river, right? And so it's not like, at least in my opinion, I'm not taking this as a dollar to donuts approach. I look at all three of those things and make a balance, right? So the social aspect, at least in my decision-making process, is as much a value as the dollar and cents is. Now, I'm going to say that to a certain extent. You know, there's only so much money that we can afford to do this. So some of the options may be less money and have a little bit different of a trade-off, right? The stormwater conveyance one may cost less money, and it may have a little bit higher social cost. So that's what I'm going to be looking at when I'm presented with the survey from you people, the triple bottom line analysis that is looking at that, and then we make that decision. You ask about the vote. This is where we're screwed, right? You guys up here, because you don't have a vote for commissioners.
So that means we're screwed.
To a certain extent, in my mind, yeah, because you can't vote for me. You can't vote for Mindy, but we are elected officials, right? So we are accountable to the public and to our ratepayers. So since you can't vote for us, I feel bad for you, but I do hear you, and myself especially feel that this is a huge asset, not only to you people, but to the whole region. And so just know that when you're saying these things, it's not like we're not hearing it, or that it's just going to be a dollar and cents, at least my vote that way. I'm looking at all three things and going to try and make the best decision that we can for all of our ratepayers.
Somebody I haven't talked to yet. Yeah, you haven't. No, go ahead.
You've given some hypotheticals. So many million, so many million. Let's take the $100 million possibility. Now, if you took that, have you yet done a spreadsheet analysis as to what would, you're shaking your head.
We've not done a spreadsheet.
Well, what I was leading up to was how would the average ratepayer of all your ratepayers, how would that impact their bill, their monthly bill, given what you know already?
Mark, you want to tell us what a $100 million bond at 4% would be over 20 years?
I think I would definitely hand the microphone to Deborah.
Where's Deborah? Another $100 million.
But that said,
the lady that's got all the money is right back there hiding.
What I can say is we will.
It's coming in August.
Yeah. So we will have an answer to that question. We don't have the answer tonight.
Don't I already have it? You're going to spend you're going to spend money either way. You're going to tear it down or you're going to restore it. It's going to be spent either way.
There's a tremendous amount of capital cost in either direction, right?
Okay.
But they're not equal. They are not equal. They are going to be
Everything
different.
the way it is. And
Could we kind of keep the queue, please? So
I'm
we can
sorry.
keep some order.
I apologize.
Yes, ma'am, and then I'll get on to you. So you're next, and then you're next in the queue. Sorry about that.
I'll make sure. So I know I've said a lot tonight, but what if Leaburg Lake didn't belong to EWEB, because it doesn't? What if another agency who had less encumbrance of some of the other factors that you have to deal with, but another agency whose mission it is to preserve recreation and beauty and the aesthetics, what if that were an alternative so that we aren't fake, you don't lose, we don't lose? Is there not some way to go that way? Heather?
You mean like the state parks department or something?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking
That's
that.
one of the good things about a meeting like this is that I know there's some pretty strong opinions here and we respect that, but also we're getting some good ideas too. And thank you very much for that, because you've got elected officials here, you've got people that are creative, and if there's a way to do that, maybe that's a thought that they'll look at, because I get it. I think the fish hatchery may be being transferred to the state parks department or from the Corps of Engineers now, or that there was that effort to try and do that. So there is some effort to do some things up here with some state parks money. So good idea. Thank you very much. In the corner over here, ma'am.
My name's Jacqueline Miter, and I have a little house on Middle Lake also. And I get wordy, so I'll just stop me when I've said too much. You keep mentioning your regulator. So I assume that's federal, correct?
Correct. It's the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission.
Might I suggest that we have a meeting that that person come instead of shoving it all on you guys? Since our federal government seems to have no problem spending money in a lot of places. Just a suggestion. When I come to a meeting, I would like all parties that have an interest to be involved. So maybe that's something that instead of you guys gathering everything and going back and begging them, they can come and hear our points of view also. As far as what I hear you guys saying is, you're at a ground-breaking level of coming up with this. You kind of brainstormed it, came up with 4 different ways. It got written in the McKenzie newspaper. We've all seen it. But you're really at that ground level. You don't know dollars amounts. You don't know which way you're just kind of sending out feelers, correct? So for us to say, what about this and what about that? We're not really even there yet. But I do think you have a room full of people that are saying, in a perfect world, we would like our water rights restored. We'd like your canal not to leak onto somebody else's property. We'd like to have our handicapped brother be able to get into Leaburg Lake in a canoe. We'd like to keep our property values where they're at in a perfect world. So how do we come about that perfect world with the restraints that we have? And I think we could all go over and over and over it, but we need you to hear that we're not real trusting of EWEB entity and really hearing what we want, or commissioners or councilmen or people that say, my vote doesn't count, so it doesn't matter. That's what I heard. So I don't know if we said anything that was really of value. I like my little house. I have a big house in Southern California. I don't like way back there. I like my little house. I like the peace. I like the things that you're all going to have to think about. The birds that migrate through here, the people that use the water, the clean water that I get out of my well. I keep taking it to town to have it tested to make sure nothing's wrong. I like those things. And I don't think anybody in this room moved up here to have something that they weren't entitled to. They live hard lives. cleaning up our yards are not easy. Living through fires is not easy. But we want to trust you, we want to work with you, and the federal government needs to be part of this.
I just want to say thank you very much for coming out, and part of the reason that we come up here and we do this work is that we want to hear from you. I mean, we could very easily just stay down in Eugene and never come up here. Why are we up here? We're up here because we want to hear from you. We do care. We're all volunteer commissioners. We do this in our spare time because we care about the community. So even though you don't have a vote for us, not one of us treats you any differently than any of the people down in Eugene. We do this because we care. We care about this community. We come up and we enjoy the Leaburg Lake just as you do. Maybe we don't live on the lake, but I love canoeing on the canal, fishing on the canal. We love this area up here. It's a massive resource for this entire community. So I understand that it's frustrating that you don't get a vote, but I can tell you not one of the people up here treats you any differently than the people down in Eugene. But at the same time, there are massive costs to any of these decisions that we're going to have to make. And I can tell you there are people that are living paycheck to paycheck, Social Security payment to Social Security payment. And when we have to make that decision about how much money we spend up here and who gets the benefit of it, there are not going to be any good decisions that we have to make. People are going to be angry no matter what we do. So I just want you to understand how difficult of a decision that's going to be for us. We came up here because we know how much this affects your livelihoods, but the $100 million that we spend up here being spread over the entire Eugene region is going to raise rates. And that's going to have big impacts on those people too. So I just want you to be aware of that as well. And again, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and views because they are important. This is our community. Thank you.
Other questions? There's one in the back that I haven't gotten, and then I'll get back to you soon.
Hi, Mark. I just wondered is this on? Yeah. Okay. I didn't understand if any of the scenarios will involve using water to create energy.
Excuse me, using water to create energy.
Power.
Power, yes. So the two alternatives for return to service do assume power generation revenues at either the existing plant site or at a new plant site.
So I was wondering how, when weighing the environmental benefits, or lack of, how we're valuing the fact that we will in the future be creating some part of clean energy.
Right. That would be an element of our triple bottom line consideration is the.
Right, I haven't seen it mentioned anywhere in the.
Yeah, so that you will start seeing those types of factors show up when we start sharing out triple bottom line results. You know, the greenness of the hydropower. You know, there's also some environmental impacts associated with hydropower that we will be reflecting in the TBM.
Okay.
So this gentleman here, I apologize, I skipped you a long time ago. Thanks for not getting that. Yeah, he's been very patient, and then I'll get back. Well, no, just a minute. I'm sorry. Because I tell him first. Oh, thank you.
All right, my name's Joel Zenia, and I wanted to just give a shout out to all the Lions crew people that are working out here and the tree crews that are working out here. They've been really supportive of homeowners that are wanting to take down more hazard trees and helping them in either taking the line down while they can take down the trees or coming and helping them and supporting them. I think for a lot of homeowners up here, there's a lot of stress with these hazard trees, and some of them don't quite fall in the criteria that they're close enough to the line to be taken care of. But I do really want to express our appreciation for your linemen's coming up, meeting with different landowners. I think over 50 with me have expressed thanks for that. It's really an important piece, and I think they're doing a great job. I do, as a volunteer firefighter up here, I do want to see if we could work on having a faster response for electrical issues. Right now, we have Olympic Lane Electric, we have a wonderful resident on call that can basically be there if there's an issue. Here, for instance, we have had an issue at Good Pasture Bridge on this weekend. And it was a almost 2-hour wait until the first guy could be there to assess the issue. There's lots of things happening in the city and it's not that simple to get people out there. But in these big events, windstorm, Friday's event wasn't quite a windstorm, it was an all spring instead, but, they do their own things. But those types of responses would be helpful, especially for us in the fire department as we tackle different things. And then the last one was to see what the projects were at Carmen Center.
Okay, you want to respond?
Thank you very much for the comments and suggestions. We'll take those into consideration. You want to comment on Carmen?
Did you have a specific question around what we're doing at Carmen?
Yeah.
Well, Mark can talk about the power plant upgrades, and then I can talk about some of the other things. And I don't know if anyone else wants to take that later.
Okay. Yeah, on the power plant side of things, we are now in our 5th year of work at the Carmen plant. We are still working on the rehabilitation of the turbine generator unit, and we have 1 more to go. So we're in year 5. We are hoping to wrap up the last piece of work in year 6, and then basically the entirety of that Carmen plant will have upgraded from 1963 equipment and technologies to modern. And then this summer, we are going to be doing a similar round of improvements at the Trowbridge plant. And once that power plant work is completed, we are expecting to be able to reopen access into the Trowbridge campground in the Smith Reservoir area. And that would be in 2024, camping season 24.
All right, and I'll just mention briefly some of the fish and wildlife and recreation improvements that we have going on up there. Mark mentioned some work we have going on around Trailbridge Campground. We have additional work that will be done at some of the other recreation sites over the next couple of years. A really cool project was completed last year to rebuild the spawning channel where mostly Chinook, but also sometimes bull trout would go spawn in. And then we have a number of upcoming habitat, both for fish and for wildlife habitat restoration projects coming in the next several years. If you want more information, we do have some written up information and folks here that can give you more details on timing.
Yep, sir, you, then I have the general manager. Go ahead.
Are the members of the FERC political appointees, or are they civil servants?
Say again?
The Federal Energy, FERC,
Yeah.
are they political appointees or are they all civil servants?
I think they're probably.
They have, yeah, the commission is appointed. We work mostly with the lower level staff that would be, salaried staff for the most part.
Right.
Yeah, the answer to that is they're both, depending on which level we're talking about. I'm just going to stand up because I wanted to see everybody and I couldn't sitting down. I've worked with this board for a while, and it's really fair to say that we have some pretty big decisions coming up, this being one of them. And I'll tell you that I would classify this decision, and I know that this board is taking this decision as what we would call a legacy decision. We know that anything that we do with Leaburg, as Canal, is going to be long-lived. It's going to last, the impacts of those decisions are going to last a lot longer than we will, being in these positions. The triple bottom line is our way of trying to dream up and think about and learn about all of the different impacts. Someone mentioned, is it going to generate? If it doesn't generate, you now have taken a carbon-free resource away that has to be replaced with something else. It's everything from lake levels to impacts on fish and wildlife, for example, to property values. All of these things have social impacts, they have environmental impacts, and they have economic impacts. There will be, actually the easiest of those probably to quantify are the financial ones, because you can get a spreadsheet out. And you can get a spreadsheet and you can look at property values, you can look at investments, and probably $100 million is on the low side, Commissioner. I've seen the preliminary numbers, sorry. But there's just a lot of other things to consider. And part of the reason that we're here, as Commissioner Carlson mentioned, is we do want to see if there's things that we are missing. This is early in the process. At the end of this year, we're going to try to present the board with as much detail as we can so that they can provide some direction. The next step is to look at direction, which might be that there's a preferred path or a preferred and an alternate path, or maybe there's a combination. Once we get to that point, ideas like, well, instead of taking out the dam, maybe there's a different ownership, different liabilities that you could consider. And so, and in fact, you saw some of the timelines. Mark mentioned a lot of construction. There's a lot of decision processes over the next years, not just, this year. We're trying to gather as much information as we can. This is part of the process. And so I was hoping I didn't have to talk today, but just listening to this, it does give us a lot of ideas and different considerations, and those are the things that we're going to try to gather up and give the board as much detail as we can. There's a second piece to this, which is in some of the return to generating type of alternatives. FERC, who's our regulator, they're a fun group to work with, let me tell you. There's also this licensing process that occurs. So the license on Leaburg, you have to work with the federal government. They grant an operating license. It's typically a 40-year kind of process, or a 40-year license. And we're halfway through the Leaburg license. So at the end of the 2030s, I think it expires in 2040. So about 2030, we have to start this next 10-year process where we have to develop agreements with stakeholders around how we're going to operate the facility, if we operate the facility, for the next 20 or 30 or 40 years. And that's what happened actually with Carmen Smith. Carmen Smith, in that process, some of the stakeholders said, well, we want a new campground, right? We want fish and wildlife mitigation. And we want other terms and conditions for EWEB for you to be able to operate this for 40 years. So there's a number of processes here. I will tell you this board is incredibly serious about looking at all these issues because they are viewing this as a legacy decision, one that's going to be long lasting, and it affects a lot of different people. It affects ratepayers, it affects people who live on the river, people who visit the community, who have moved here. And so we're going to try to gather as much information as we can and be as thorough as we can to help this board set some direction going forward. And there were two paths that had, this option or this option, but it's very likely we'll get there. We'll go, okay, here's what we think might be a good path, but there's still more to learn. And this is part of that process. So I just wanted to say that we're going to look at this from every angle we can, and we appreciate the ideas and the concerns and the thought process and the contribution that you're making. That's why we're here, and that's why we take what you say very seriously. So, John?
Thank you. I know that we scheduled, I've got two more in the queue. We scheduled this for an hour. We're a half hour over, but we're here as long as you want us to be here to listen. And so I'll go with you, Will, and then Steve.
I've got to change the subject, and that is the billing issue. I'm wondering if it would be possible for the billing program to note on my bill every month if it's an estimated bill. That would be very helpful to me because I can't figure out where the averages came from, and I'm going to have a discussion later with these folks about it, but that would be a request from me. The other thing is there's kind of a sleeping giant called COSA that I understand was going to be reviewed again mid-year, and haven't really heard anything about it. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Will Rutherford, and since 2010, I've been attending most every EWEB Commissioners meeting. And so I try to follow this stuff and then report it back through the McKenzie Clearwater Coalition website. And I'm interested in where COSA is, or what the schedule is, or what's going to happen. And that's the cost of service analysis, which could affect our electric rates.
Who's going to answer the question from staff on COSA, where we are?
I can take the first shot at that. On your bill, there's two places where it identifies that it's an estimated read. In the top left corner on the front page, there's a messages section that will tell you that it's an estimated bill. And I believe it's on the second page also, it has in red writing, it has a little asterisk that will tell you that it's an estimated bill. So.
You have to really look.
You gotta look.
Why not just below the usage graph on every month?
It's a complex deal putting together a bill, and eventually, when we get a new CIS system, we may have all kinds of additional functionality where we could tailor something like that.
Thank you. Steve?
Just one comment, you have a federal agency called FERC that's on your butts all the time. We have another federal agency up here called Corps of Engineers. And right now, Cougar Reservoir is down 170 feet. It might not ever be filled again. And it supplies a lot of water to EWEB. And I just want to know if you guys were concerned when all this thing went to court about.
We know that they're making it what's called run of the river. They're not going to, may not impound water there anymore because of the salmon issue and everything. But I think either Mark or Frank or somebody else could speak with more specificity about it. But yeah, when I saw that, that really, they got a dam and just leave it open, and that's it. Unless it's really a major flood. So if you want to talk this back.
Yeah, sure, thank you. So EWEB uses, or I say we borrow water from the river for a number of purposes. Generation is one of them. We return that. It goes through a generator and returns back. The other one is drinking water. Both of those use either very controlled levels of water. In the case of generation, it's a CFS limitation, and sometimes there's too much water in the river and sometimes too little. That would impact our generation. We already, with Walterville, make adjustments in the summer for conditions that are low water years, and we'll actually operate that facility at a lower level. So we can make adjustments if there's different flows coming because of cougar or other types of reasons. The water usage is really low from a drinking water perspective. City of Eugene, it sounds like a lot on a summer day. City of Eugene uses about 50 million gallons of water a day. But even in the lowest of conditions in the McKenzie, that's about 4% of the flow. So as much as it may have impacts relative to silt and other things, the actual water level condition is I would say, not a concern for us. There are a number of other issues relative to generation and other things, not just with Cougar, but some of the other dams in the Willamette system that Bonneville and the Corps of Engineers have decided are not affordable to operate as generating facilities. So it's not just Cougar, it's some of the other ones. So they've decided to make that sacrifice. But water usage is probably not a concern. I wanted to also, Will, you touched on COSA. So cost of service analysis is something that we'll continue to look at, but not specifically and just from a Upriver McKenzie Valley perspective. One of the things that we recognize that we have to do probably over the next few years is to look at how we're pricing electricity relative to the resources that we have to use to get that electricity. I don't know if you really understand the volatility of the markets that we deal with to buy electricity, but those change every hour. Prices go up and down, it's seasonal. Now we're starting to get more and more wind and solar on the system, which creates times of surplus and shortage. So prices tend to go all over. So time of use matters to us as well. And so when we start to look at things like time of use and other rates, it'll be over the next few years. We'll start to look at how we take our costs as a utility and divide those up into the rates that you all pay. So probably not this year, Will, just so you put your mind at ease. But over the next few years, in the context of how we price electricity in general, we'll start to look at how our costs get divided up.
Yes, ma'am.
Have we looked at, or, and this might be foolish to even say, but have we looked at getting any of the infrastructure money that's available? Because we're talking about clean energy use and, you know, we got Biden coming to town on Thursday, you know, anybody going up there?
Well, put in a good word for it. Yeah, there's, I think
Maybe not.
the last time I was with Peter DeBazio, he said that there's a boatload of money coming, and I wasn't quite sure what he meant by that. Now I get a little bit of a clue. But we've actually leveraged the county, a number of other, some of it flows, you have to follow the money, I guess how you say. Some of it comes through the state, some of it through the county. We also at EWEB recently hired a grant writer to help with a lot of infrastructure projects. Water and electricity seems to be pretty high on the list of priorities, along with resiliency and some of these other things. So we've put a group together that has basically looking at all different kinds of opportunities, federal, state, and then we're trying to get projects so that they're project ready, so that we can pull in the funding and then look at opportunities that we can use that. But it is a really great opportunity. Our CFO is right behind you if you want to put a note into her. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunity to spend money. The challenge, I don't know if people in this area, we're having challenges right now with supply chain and labor workforce. All of those are having some scarcity issues. So even if I never thought that I would say this, sometimes it's going to be hard to spend money. Tell that to our operations people, by the way. But yeah, it really is. There's a lot of different challenges, but that's a great opportunity. I'm glad you brought it up. And actually, we've so far been able to leverage several $1 million already. So thank you. Can I give this up, please?
That's why I get the big bucks. I think there's a gentleman here I haven't asked, and then I'll get back over to you in the corner. Yes, sir.
It kind of sounds like hydroelectric energy is not as demanded anymore, as much as it used to be, because it seems like there's a lot of dams that are being decommissioned.
No, it's the cleanest thing there
I know
is.
it's the cleanest.
Yeah, but the salmon are gonna win over the power.
That's what I was wondering.
Yes.
So it's not the cost of the hydroelectric
He hates me to
generation.
say that.
And what's replacing the hydroelectric power if we're not going to be using it?
It's a great question. What's going to replace hydroelectric power? So we are actually under pressure in a couple of different ways. If you think about all the resources that historically have operated in the West, and we're part of a big grid. And so you look, it's been a combination of coal, nuclear, natural gas. We are very fortunate in the Northwest to have had a lot of hydro, which is a carbon-free resource. Now, hydro itself is also under attack because of fish and wildlife and operational constraints. And so in the evaluation of a lot of projects, people look at it. For example, EWEB, I would say out of the $150 or so million that Commissioner Brown mentioned earlier to relicense Carmen Smith, about a quarter of that actually goes to things that generate electricity. The other is all the ancillary things, becoming very expensive. About 30 cents on the dollar for hydroelectricity goes to fish and wildlife costs. So about a third of it. And then also, there's a lot of talk about dam breaching on the Snake River and further operational restrictions. State of Oregon sued the federal government around operating the dams on the Columbia. It's just putting a lot of pressure on the, the question that you asked, which is, where is our electricity going to come from? It's actually probably my biggest concern personally, is you take away resources that we had control of as people, and you replace it with wind and solar, which, no offense to Mother Nature, she controls at a different time than we do. And so you have to overbuild that to get the same reliability. If you take out, 1 unit of natural gas, you have to replace it with 3 to 5 times more wind and solar just to get the same reliability. And that becomes very expensive. And also the reliability piece is a concern. So it's a great question. It's part of what goes into our decision around Leaburg, is that it's a carbon-free resource. It doesn't generate any carbon emissions. It's run of the river, so when the rivers flow in, we generate. It's not like we store a whole bunch and can move the electricity around when we need it, but it's a big challenge for us going forward. I don't know if that answered your question, but we are also, this year, by December, we're going to do what we call an integrated resource plan, which looks at all of our different generating options compared to our consumption and aligns what resources we're going to need and what will be the most practical combination of resources from all the different characteristics. Environmental impact, reliability, cost, all those things goes into that. And that'll give us a little bit of picture as to what kind of resources we're going to need going forward as our consumption grows. That's a long answer.
Take that mic again.
Yeah.
Back in the corner, sir.
Appreciate that. Thank you. My question is kind of on a related topic. So I think one of the proposals was to get into full service was to maybe build a new power plant. My question was, I know when it was at full operation, there were questions about I think the ratio of energy generated and the cost of operation wasn't maybe a great favorable ratio. Would a new power plant maybe be more efficient? And then my comment after that is just, if you're going to spend this much money on River, I would urge the board to consider maybe a community benefits agreement so that it's local jobs that prevent wages.
Do you want to comment on the efficiency of the new power plant?
Yeah, there'd be a couple of advantages to a new plant. We are driving a Model A power plant, meaning it was built in 28, and it doesn't have a lot of the bells and whistles of a 2022 Ford. So, yep, it would be a lot more efficient. It would be seismically designed so that it persists after a seismic event. 1928 building doesn't. So it would be a lot different than what we are currently operating.
So there's a gentleman right here, and then I'll get to you, Matt.
I have one silly question. Why do you have to run the water 4 miles downstream?
That pressure. Why do we have to run the water?
Canal?
Oh, yeah, so we divert the water at the dam, and then as it's heading downstream, it's gaining elevation over the river. The river is falling faster. The canal is essentially flat. So by the time we get to the forebay, we've got 80 feet of height. That's our potential energy that we're converting into electricity.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to clarify, of the 4 options for the canal, is there only one that generates revenue?
2,
The partial and the full recovery?
correct.
So the partial would also generate some income from that as well?
Right, it would be a shorter canal, and instead of having 80 feet ahead, we'll have more like 30 feet ahead. So it wouldn't generate as much power because it doesn't have as much driving head behind it.
And so that would help to cover some of the costs in the future?
It would have a revenue stream that the decommissioning options do not have.
Ma'am in the blue, you had a question?
I was just wondering, you said 4.5 miles for the full, and then
mile and a half, where's the mile and a half located?
It's on the map here. You could, one of these gentlemen can show you.
From the dam to Watsonville Way, if you ever walk on the canal where you see the concrete flume area, it'd be from the dam to there. So this is the beginning of the project up here at the dam.
Does that go all the way down to Johnson?
Okay, I've got you and then you, and then I think people want to wrap it up.
Yeah, I
Go
know.
ahead.
So I've got a question for everyone in the room. If we had I'm thinking about the fire now. If we had another wind event in the summer like we did a couple of years ago, how many of you would moan about having your power turned off before the fire? How many of you would be critical of EWEB if EWEB turned off our power before we caught on fire?
I think that's the only thing that saved my house.
Correct.
EWEB
We
turned us off
volunteer.
way before they got turned off.
Would we all volunteer, cut off our power? We're used to power outages. We all know, we know what to do. We don't flush. We know what to do.
That is
But just
true. We
turn-
will never blame you for shutting off.
We
our
won't.
power.
And we saw that was like at the bottom, at the very worst, you would cut service, in a risk mitigate for a fire. And we're telling you tonight, don't worry,
Please
do it.
Yeah.
Flip the switch.
Thank you for that feedback. We appreciate that. Thank you.
We won't know the
Yes, sir.
difference.
Just a quick question, and maybe you don't know the specifics, but in the return to service alternatives, on Leaburg Dam, would it require a complete rebuilding of the dam itself? No? So none of the crossing or the bridge would be affected?
Mark, could speak to that. We just had to replace the roll gates. Remember when they got stuck open?
Yeah.
Stuck shut?
Yeah, so there would be, we would not need to rebuild the dam. We would need to continue investing in the dam to maintain its reliability, but no reconstruction. There would be a couple of spots where we need to do some seismic reinforcement, but for the most part, the dam is in very good shape.
Okay, we're kind of getting towards the end of this. I'd like to, on behalf of the board and EWEB staff, thank everybody for coming out this evening. This has been the best turnout I've seen in 20 years. I just want you to take advantage of all the staff and all the knowledge we have here. If you want to see maps of the options, they're over here. If you want to talk about Pure Water Partners, customer service, tree trimming, anything. And if you don't find a station that you want to talk about something, talk to our general manager and he'll find somebody. With that, I'd like to thank you all for coming and really appreciate it. Thank you.